Lucas was a 12-year-old boy who lived in a quiet neighborhood in Seattle, Washington. He was a typical boy his age, curious, full of energy, and with a natural kindness that always stood out. Your parents, Clara and Roberto, owned a small bakery where Lucas loved to spend his afternoons after school, helping to organize the bread and, occasionally, trying one or another treat. Lucas's life was simple but happy. He went to a local public school, had some good friends, and was known for always wanting to help others, whether it was volunteering his time for a task at the bakery or sharing his lunch with someone in need. And it was in one of these gestures that it all began. One afternoon as he was leaving school, Lucas noticed a man sitting on a bench in the city's central square. The man was dressed in worn-out clothes and had a lost look, staring into space. He seemed invisible to everyone around him, who hurried past without even noticing his presence. But Lucas noticed. Something in that man's eyes caught his attention, and without thinking twice, he approached. "Hi, sir," Lucas said shyly, holding out the sandwich his mother had made for lunch. "Do you want to eat?" The man, surprised by the boy's kindness, looked up. For a moment it looked like he was about to refuse, but his hunger was stronger than his pride. In a low, hoarse voice, he thanked her and took the sandwich. Lucas sat next to him, and while the man was eating in silence, something unexpected happened. "You're a lot like someone I knew many years ago," the man said suddenly, his voice thick with emotion. Lucas, curious, asked, "Who? Who do I look like?" The man sighed and closed his eyes for a moment as if he was fighting the memories. "With a boy I knew. With your grandfather." Lucas was confused. "My grandfather? How did you know my grandfather?" The man hesitated, but it felt like something inside him was pushing him to speak. He began to tell a story that Lucas never imagined hearing. The man revealed that years ago, he had worked with Lucas's grandfather, Miguel, in a small mechanical workshop. They were great friends, almost like brothers. But something terrible happened, something that separated them and changed the course of their lives. "Your grandfather, he trusted me with something important, but I failed. After that, I lost everything," the man explained, his voice cracking with guilt and pain. "I walked away from everything and everyone. I never had the courage to look for him or his family again." Lucas, still surprised, didn't know what to say. It was as if a door to his family's past had suddenly been opened. "But what happened? What made you lose everything?" The man was silent for a long time, seeming to struggle with his own demons. Finally, he murmured, "I can't tell you everything now. Not yet. But if you give me a chance, I can try to make peace with my past and with your family." And so, the meeting that began with a simple sandwich turned into the beginning of an unexpected journey. Lucas decided to help the man rediscover his past and perhaps find a way back to the life he had lost. Lucas couldn't get the man's words out of his head. During the following days, he began to visit him daily in the square, bringing not only food, but also questions. His name was Joaquim, and with each conversation, Lucas discovered more about his own family's past and about the man Joaquim once was. Joaquim said that when he was young, he and Lucas's grandfather Miguel were inseparable. They worked together in the small mechanical workshop that Miguel had inherited from his father. Miguel was the best mechanic in the city, and Joaquim was his right-hand man. But a devastating event had broken that friendship and changed their lives forever. One day, Joaquim finally revealed what happened. "It was a bad choice, Lucas," he said, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I was young and greedy. A man offered me money to steal car parts that we repaired in the workshop. I didn't think about the consequences, just the money I could make." Lucas listened in silence, trying to understand how something like that could have caused so much damage. "But then what went wrong?" Joaquim sighed. "Your grandfather trusted me blindly, and I betrayed that trust. When he found out what I had done, he felt so betrayed that he couldn't forgive me. It broke the friendship we had. And more than that, it broke me. I lost my job. I lost my friends. And eventually I lost everything. I could never recover from that. And I ended up on the street, not having the courage to face his grandfather or any of his family again." Lucas was shocked to hear this. He had never imagined that his grandfather, a man always so calm and kind, had experienced something so painful. He knew that this revelation was just the beginning and that, in some way, he needed to help Joaquim face the past and seek redemption. But that wouldn't be easy. When Lucas told what he had discovered to his parents, he encountered resistance. Clara, his mother, was immediately suspicious. "Lucas, we need to be careful," she said. "If he really did what he's saying, he hurt his grandfather and our family. We can't just let it all go like nothing happened." But Lucas was determined. "Mommy, he's been paying for his mistakes for so long, he just wants a chance to make things right." Roberto, Lucas's father, was silent for a while but finally agreed. "If he wants to redeem himself, maybe we should give him that opportunity. But let's do it together, as a family." Lucas and his parents began to devise a plan. First, they needed to know if what Joaquim said was true. To do this, Lucas suggested that they look for some of their grandfather's old acquaintances, people who could confirm the story. One of these acquaintances was Dona Helena, an old neighbor of the family who had always been close to Miguel. Dona Helena confirmed much of the story. "Your grandfather never spoke much about it, but I know he was deeply hurt. Miguel was always a man of principle, and when this happened, it was as if he had lost a brother." With the truth confirmed, the family decided to help Joaquim get back on his feet. They took him to a shelter, where he could begin to rebuild his life with dignity. But Joaquim's journey was just beginning, and there were more obstacles ahead. While Joaquim tried to get back on his feet, Lucas got closer to the man, creating an almost paternal bond. Joaquim taught him about mechanics, about how machines, like people, needed care and repairs, and how sometimes it was necessary to completely disassemble something to be able to rebuild it better. But not everyone was willing to forgive. A former customer of the workshop, Senior Johnson, he still held a grudge for what had happened. He had lost a lot of money at the time, and the revelation that Joaquim was back brought up old resentments. He began spreading rumors in the city, trying to prevent Joaquim from finding work or even reconnecting with the community. This created new tension. Joaquim began to question whether he really deserved a second chance. "Maybe I'd better leave for good, Lucas," he said one day, dejectedly. "I'm just causing trouble for everyone." But Lucas, determined to help his friend, encouraged him to continue. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Joaquim. You've already lost so much. Now it's time to win back what you lost, no matter what others say." And so, Joaquim's internal battle intensified, as Lucas and his family did everything they could to help him overcome obstacles and prove that he could be trustworthy again. Autumn arrived in Seattle, bringing with it the cold wind and the yellowed leaves that covered the city's streets. For Joaquim, each day was a fight against the ghosts of the past and the uncertainties of the future. Although he was making progress at the shelter, with the help of Lucas and his family, the weight of his past choices still haunted him. One afternoon, while working with Lucas at the bakery, Joaquim received an unexpected visitor. It was Senior Johnson, the former client who had never forgiven him. His face was closed, and there was a palpable tension in the air. "We need to talk," Mr. Johnson said, addressing Joaquim with a tone that mixed anger and determination. "You can't just come back here and pretend like nothing happened." Lucas, who was next to Joaquim, was alert, but Joaquim raised his hand, asking him not to interfere. "I understand how you feel, Mr. Johnson. I've made terrible mistakes, and I don't expect you to forgive me." Mr. Johnson, with his eyes fixed on Joaquim, responded in a hard voice. "You have no idea what your actions cost me. My company almost went bankrupt because of that fraud. I lost customers, friends. My life was ruined." Joaquim took a deep breath, feeling guilt tighten his chest like a chain. "I know my words can't fix what I did, but I'm trying to be a better person now. I want to make up for it somehow." At that moment, Lucas intervened. "Mr. Johnson, please, he's trying to redeem himself. He's been working hard to change and help people. Maybe you could give him a chance to make amends." Mr. Johnson hesitated. His anger was clearly fighting against an almost imperceptible desire to believe that people could change. After a long silence, he said, "Very well. I'll give you a chance, but under one condition. I need someone to restore my old classic car. If you can do that without any mistakes, maybe I can reconsider my opinion of you." Joaquim accepted the challenge. Restoring Mr. Johnson's car would be his chance to prove that he had changed, not only for Mr. Johnson but for himself. However, this would not be an easy job. The car was in terrible condition, and any mistake could jeopardize the entire work. For weeks, Joachim dedicated himself to restoring the car. Lucas was by her side whenever he could, learning and helping wherever he could. The restoration process became a metaphor for Joachim's own life, an arduous effort to repair something that seemed irreparably damaged. As the work progressed, the community began to notice the change in Joachim. Some of the workshop's old customers began to show up to see the car being restored, curious about the man who had once betrayed everyone's trust. There was distrust, but also a glimmer of hope that perhaps people really could change. But the turning point came when Joachim faced a critical problem with his car's engine. It was a specific piece that he had misappropriated years ago to sell, which led him down the road to ruin. Now, without this part, the restoration could not be completed. Desperate, Joachim tried to find a solution, but parts for that old model were very rare. Lucas, noticing Joachim's desperation, decided to act. He remembered a story his grandfather Miguel had told him about an old warehouse on the outskirts of town where old and rare pieces were kept. Without saying anything to Joachim, Lucas decided to look for the warehouse. After days of searching, Lucas finally found the warehouse. It was an old and dusty place, but full of forgotten treasures. With the help of the owner of the place, Lucas got the piece Joachim needed. When Lucas returned with the play, Joachim was speechless. His eyes filled with tears as he held the piece in his hands, feeling the symbolic weight of that moment. "Lucas, you have no idea what this means to me. It's like I'm being given a new chance to fix everything, starting here." With the part in hand, Joachim was able to finish restoring the car. When Mr. Johnson came to pick up the vehicle, he was impressed with the impeccable workmanship. "I didn't believe you could do it," he said, his eyes softening. "But you did an amazing job. Maybe I was wrong about you." It was at that moment that Joachim felt something change inside him. For the first time in years, he felt like he had a new opportunity, a real chance to start over. The community, little by little, began to accept him again, and Joachim began to believe that he could find a place for himself in society, alongside his new family, Lucas and his parents. With the car restored and Mr. Johnson's confidence partially recovered, Joachim began to feel more confident in his journey of redemption. However, he knew that his transformation was far from complete. Despite the small victories, there was still much to be done to repair the damage caused by its past. News of the successful restoration began to spread throughout the neighborhood, and more people approached Joachim. Some old friends of Miguel, Lucas's grandfather, came to see him, bringing memories and stories that made him reflect even more on his past choices. Among them was Mr. Martinez, a man who had always respected Joachim, but who, after the incident, cut off all contact with him. Mr. Martinez arrived at the bakery one day unannounced and asked to speak to Joachim. They sat together at a table in the back, and Mr. Martinez, with a serious look, began to speak. "Joachim, I heard about what you did to Mr. Johnson's car. It makes me think that maybe you really are changing," he said, his voice wavering between skepticism and hope. "But I have to ask you, why did you decide to come back now after all these years?" Joachim sighed, feeling the weight of the question. "I lost everything, Mr. Martinez. I spent years on the streets fighting guilt, regret. I knew I couldn't go on like this. When Lucas offered me that sandwich, it was like a door opened, giving me a chance to come back, to fix what I did." Mr. Martinez observed Joachim carefully before responding. "If you really want to redeem yourself, you're going to need to do more than just fix cars. You're going to need to face the people you've hurt, and most importantly, forgive yourself." These words hit Joachim deeply. He knew Mr. Martinez was right. Restoring the car was a first step, but he still needed to make peace with the people who suffered most because of his choices. This included, above all, Miguel's own family, whom he had betrayed. With this determination, Joachim decided to take the next step, looking for Dona Clara, Miguel's widow and Lucas's grandmother, who lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city. He knew that this would be the biggest challenge of all, as Clara was the person most affected by the betrayal, losing not only a close friend but also trust in someone she considered part of the family. Lucas, who accompanied Joaquim on all his visits, decided to go with him. They arrived at Dona Clara's house on a cold afternoon, and Joaquim hesitated before knocking on the door. When Clara opened it, her gaze met Joaquim's, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. "Joaquim," she said with a voice that mixed surprise and pain. "Why are you here?" I needed to see you, Clara," replied Joaquim, his voice choked with emotion. "I need to ask for forgiveness for what I did. I know that nothing I say or do can erase the past, but I'm trying to change, trying to be someone better." Clara was silent for a moment, as if weighing Joaquim's every word. Finally, she invited him in. They sat in the living room, and Joaquim began to tell her everything: his struggles, his regret, and his desperate desire to make peace with her and his own conscience. Clara listened in silence, her eyes fixed on the man who had once been like a brother to her husband. When Joaquim finished, tears ran down his face, but there was an expression of relief mixed with sadness. "Joaquim, what you did hurt us so much," she began, her voice shaking. "But seeing you here today shows me that people really can change. Miguel always said that everyone deserves a second chance, even those who hurt us deeply." Joaquim looked at Clara, feeling a mixture of hope and guilt. "I wish I had heard this sooner, Clara. I walked away because I was scared, because I knew I let you down. But now I want to do whatever it takes to make amends." Clara smiled slightly, a sad but sincere smile. "Miguel would forgive you, Joaquim. And I also want to forgive. It won't be easy, but maybe with time we can heal these wounds." This conversation marked a turning point in Joaquim's life. With Clara's forgiveness, he felt he could begin to forgive himself too. Lucas, who witnessed the entire scene, felt profound pride for his friend. He knew this journey hadn't been easy, but seeing Joaquim fight his demons and seek redemption was something that deeply inspired him. In the following months, Joaquim continued to work hard, both at the bakery and in the community. He began organizing events to help other homeless people, using his mechanical skills to fix cars and bikes for free for those who couldn't afford them. The community, which had previously viewed him with suspicion, began to accept him again, recognizing his genuine effort to change. But Joaquim's biggest growth was internal. He learned to forgive himself, to accept that the past could not be changed, but that the future was still in his hands. And with the support of Lucas, Clara, and the entire community, he finally found peace. Spring has arrived in Seattle, bringing a sense of renewal and hope. Joaquim, now more integrated into the community, began to realize that his life was finally taking a positive direction. He had become a respected figure, especially among young people, who saw him as an example of overcoming and redemption. Although everything was improving, there was one last piece of this puzzle that still needed to be put in place: Joaquim's relationship with his own past. Although he had made peace with Clara and some of the people he had hurt, there was still something that tormented him deeply. The fact that he had never completely forgiven himself for what he had done. This internal conflict came to a head when Clara, in a gesture of generosity and hope, invited Joaquim to participate in the annual event in memory of Miguel, a celebration of the life and legacy of Lucas's grandfather. The event, which took place in the workshop where Miguel worked throughout his life, brought together friends, family, and former customers to remember the positive impact Miguel had on the community. Joaquim, honored by the invitation, but at the same time terrified, knew that this would be his last test. Facing the place where it all began, and where it all fell apart, would be the ultimate test of his journey of redemption. On the day of the event, Joaquim arrived at Miguel's old workshop with Lucas by his side. Memories began to flood his mind as soon as he walked through the door, as if every tool, every piece of metal, told a story. He remembered the laughs he and Miguel shared, the conversations about life and the promises of a prosperous future that never came to fruition. People at the event were surprised to see him there. Some still looked at him suspiciously, while others greeted him with hesitant smiles. Clara, with an encouraging look, approached Joaquim and handed him a box. Inside it was Miguel's old pocket watch, a symbol of his legacy and his passion for mechanics. "Miguel wanted you to have this," Clara said softly. "He believed you could have been a great man, Joaquim. And I believe you still can be." Joaquim felt a lump in his throat as he held the watch. It was as if all the weight of the past was concentrated in that small object. He knew this was the defining moment. The moment when he would finally face his greatest fears and regrets. Suddenly, Mr. Johnson appeared, bringing with him an envelope. "Joaquim," he said, "you proved yourself by restoring my car, and I have something for you. It's a letter Miguel left before he died. I thought I'd never read it, but I think now is the right time." With shaking hands, Joaquim opened the envelope and began to read the letter out loud, so everyone could hear. "Joaquim," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it is because you have found your way back. I want you to know that I forgive you. We all make mistakes, and the most important thing is what we do after them. It is never too late to start over. Use this time to fix what was broken, not just in the machines but in your own life. You have always been like a brother to me, and I hope you find peace in your heart." Tears ran down Joaquim's face as he read Miguel's words of forgiveness. It was as if an immense chain that tied him to the past had finally broken. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe freely. The moment was moving for everyone present. The tension that had been in the air since the beginning of the event dissipated, giving way to a feeling of unity and healing. People began to applaud, not only in recognition of Miguel's legacy, but also in support of Joaquim, who had finally found his path. Joaquim, still holding the watch and the letter, felt a wave of emotion sweep through his body. He turned to Lucas, who had been by his side the entire time, and hugged him tightly. "Thanks, kid," he whispered. "Without you, I never would have made it." Lucas, moved, returned the hug. He knew that Joaquim had found what he was looking for, not just forgiveness from others, but, more importantly, forgiveness from himself. The event continued with an atmosphere of joy and reconciliation. Joaquim, now lighter than ever, walked around the workshop sharing stories about Miguel, smiling and laughing with people who previously avoided him. This was the culmination of his journey, the moment when he finally felt at peace with his past and prepared for a better future. With the event in memory of Miguel coming to an end, the workshop gradually emptied. The yellowish lights of dusk were beginning to shine through the windows, casting a soft glow on the tools and machines that had been witnesses to so many stories over the years. Joaquim, still holding Miguel's watch, stood in the middle of the workshop, feeling the environment around him. He looked around every corner, remembering the good and bad times, and finally felt like he could say goodbye to his past without pain or regret. Lucas, who was by Joaquim's side throughout the event, approached with a smile. "Joaquim, I think Grandpa would be very proud of you." Joaquim smiled back, feeling deep gratitude. "Thank you, Lucas. I couldn't have done it without you and your family. You gave me another chance, and that means more than I could ever express." Clara, who was observing the scene from afar, approached with her eyes full of tears, but a warm smile on her face. "Miguel always believed in the best in people, and today, I saw what he always saw in you, Joaquim. We are happy to have you back." Joaquim, moved, hugged Clara, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. The forgiveness he sought so long finally reached him, and he knew he was ready to move on with his life. The wounds of the past were healing, and in their place, a new strength was growing, based on love, friendship, and renewal. With Miguel's watch now in his pocket, Joaquim felt it was time to give back what he had received. He decided to remain in Seattle, not just as a private citizen, but as a pillar of the community, helping those who were in similar life situations to his own. He began working at Clara and Roberto's bakery, not only repairing equipment and cars, but also offering workshops to young people, teaching them mechanics and, most importantly, about the importance of choosing the right path in life. Miguel's workshop, which had been closed for so many years, was reopened by Joaquim and Lucas. They turned it into a place not just for work, but for learning and personal growth. Young people from all over the community started coming to it, learning not only about cars but about the importance of responsibility, forgiveness, and redemption. Over time, the workshop became a symbol of hope in Seattle, a place where past mistakes could be righted and where everyone had a second chance. Joaquim was often approached by people seeking advice, and he, with his life experience, offered guidance and support. His story inspired many, showing that no matter how deep you fall, you can always get back up. Lucas, now closer to Joaquim than ever, also became an important figure in the workshop. He learned a lot alongside Joaquim, not just about mechanics, but about life. The relationship between the two grew stronger, and Lucas began to see him as a mentor and a second grandfather. Clara, seeing Joaquim's positive impact on the community, felt a peace that she hadn't experienced in a long time. She knew Miguel would be happy with the way things had turned out and proud of Joaquim's transformation. Over the years, Joaquim's life stabilized. He found a new purpose, a new family, and a new beginning. And every time he looked at Miguel's watch, he was reminded of the power of forgiveness and the importance of moving forward, leaving the past where it belongs, as a lesson learned and not as a burden to be borne. Joaquim, Lucas, and the entire Seattle community knew that, in the end, Miguel's true legacy was not in the machines he fixed, but in the lives he touched. And so, Joaquim's story became an indelible part of that legacy, a tale of redemption, renewal, and the transformative power of second chances. 5 years have passed since the day Joaquim found his redemption in Miguel's workshop. Clara and Roberto's small bakery continued to prosper, and Lucas, now 17 years old, had become a promising young man, known not only for his talent in mechanics, but also for his kindness and wisdom, qualities he acquired alongside Joaquim. The workshop, reopened and renovated, has become a reference point in the community. Young people and adults attended it, not just to learn a trade, but to find a space for support and growth. Joaquim, who had become a mentor to many, was respected and admired, his story of overcoming echoes in every corner of the city. On a sunny morning, Joaquim walked through the workshop, now full of life, with the sound of laughter and tools in the background. He stopped for a moment, watching Lucas, who was explaining to a group of boys how to tune a car engine. Joaquim smiled, proud of the young man who had once offered him a simple sandwich without knowing that that gesture would change their lives forever. Clara, who had moved to a house close to the workshop, used to visit the place every day. She felt an inner peace seeing how Miguel's workshop was still alive, now not just fixing cars, but fixing lives. On many afternoons, she would sit on a bench outside, watching Joaquim and Lucas work together, feeling Miguel's presence there between them as if he had never left. Miguel's watch, now always in Joaquim's pocket, had become a symbol of time well spent, time of learning, of growth, of reconciliation. Joaquim knew that the time he had left on Earth was limited, but he also knew that, finally, he was living well. That day, before closing the workshop, Joaquim stopped for a moment, watching the sunset that colored the sky orange and gold. He felt a deep calm, a complete acceptance of his journey. The past had been redeemed, and the future was full of possibilities. As Lucas approached, covered in grease and with a smile on his face, Joaquim placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You made all the difference in my life, Lucas. Thank you for believing in me when I had already given up." Lucas, with the same smile he always had, replied, "You taught me that everyone deserves a second chance, Joaquim, and I think we lived up to that." With one last look at the workshop, now full of life and hope, Joaquim and Lucas left together, ready to face whatever the future held for them, knowing that, regardless of the challenges, they had a story of overcoming and friendship to guide them. And so Joaquim's journey, which began with betrayal, found its end in redemption, proving that in the end, the power of forgiveness and second chances can transform any life.